Make sure you don't miss a thing. Go to starzology.com/newsletter and sign up. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here.
So nice to have you once more. So in this episode, we're going to be doing a 2025 look ahead.
Yes.
So as we come to the end of the year, we like to look what's happening in the new year. I mean, why wouldn't we?
Right.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the months and pick out some important astrological events that are unfolding, because I mean, not everything's important,
right? And
give some highlight conversation about what to look for or what we think is dead fun coming up.
And of course, as we go through, we'll do a bit more focused episodes on things like Uranus entering Gemini, for example. Like we'll do the big ingresses, we'll do the big aspects, we'll do those episodes
as individual podcasts
as they come.
Yes.
But this is just an overview of the next calendar year.
Yeah, because this is going out now, the last week in the year, I think, and it's going to be something to think about. And as an astrologer, you need to be looking at what's happening in the next 12 months. In fact, really, you should have done it before now. But anyway, you want to know what's going to unfold, because when you're forecasting for your clients, you're looking 12 months ahead anyway.
Yeah.
So you're going to be paying attention to what's going to be unfolding. And some things are just more important than others. I mean, obviously,
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure what you have up your sleeve there, Arwynne, but if we're going to do it monthly, there are 3 things I like to focus on in forecasting.
All right.
So when I'm forecasting, the 3 things I like to focus on. So it's the ingresses, the stations, and the eclipses, which if you go together, that's ISE, which in my head I call ice, even though it's spelled differently, because we're looking at the ice for the new year.
All right. And it's cold in the winter. I get it. Got it. Okay.
So those are 3 main things that I would be looking at. And of course, there are any other things that pop up that we want to talk about as well.
Yeah. For me, I like to look at the big ingresses, obviously. Major aspects where I like to look at like Jupiter forward, obviously, because everything else pretty much happens super commonly.
What do you mean forward?
So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So if Jupiter is aspecting Pluto, that's a major aspect.
Okay.
It's an interesting aspect. It doesn't happen very often. And, if Saturn is aspecting Neptune, these things don't happen often.
The heavy hitters.
The heavy hitters. I like to definitely look at those. We've only got, I think, 1 of those happening this year, but still.
Well, that's interesting because I'm not really looking at those. So you are, so that's great.
And then, of course, the Mercury retrograde, that happens 3 times a year.
Okay.
It's good to pull those out. And then, eclipses, as you said.
Fantastic. Yeah. So how much can you say in half an hour, right? Well,
yeah.
So do you want to do this month by month?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's then have a look at January 2025.
Yeah.
Hello, New Year.
Right.
And discuss the main astrological events that's going to happen in that month.
Yeah.
Okay.
I only have 1, and that is the North Node entering Pisces. So North Node is entering Pisces. We're going to be doing an entire episode on that, and that happens January 11th, which is
pretty much in the new year, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the first things that's going to be happening in the new year. And I love the North Node. I have, despite the fact that I have it in Capricorn, which is like, yikes. No offense to any Capricorns out there, but it's so not like anything that's related to me. But as we've said before, when we talk about the North Node, it frequently is something that is absolutely unfamiliar to you. It's uncomfortable, and it's where you're moving into in life. So I like the North Node. It's really interesting. It's not a planet, whatever.
Yeah, it's
whatever
an interesting point. Yeah. So, and then of course, just to be clear, then the South Node is entering Virgo.
Yeah.
So that will be tapping all your Virgo planets and so on.
Exactly.
Okay, so that will be a great thing, and we'll definitely be doing a main program about that anyway.
Yes.
Okay, so if we turn our attention to February, there's nothing really of the big boys making any kind of shifts or changes.
It's a free parking, as they say in Monopoly. Yeah.
Okay, get out a free card month.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so then how about if we turn our attention to March?
March, we have some stuff happening. So March 15th, we have the first Mercury retrograde of the year, and that is happening at 9 degrees Aries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Mercury does 3 retrograde periods each year, and sorry, what sign did you say it was in?
Aries.
Okay.
So at 9 degrees Aries, it will turn retrograde on March 15th. So of course, there's that shadow period, as people say, it's a couple weeks before, 3 weeks, whatever.
Okay.
And
so that's good. And what else have we got for March?
On March 30th, Neptune will enter Aries. That's a big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is huge.
Huge. Neptune only moves once every 12 years. So, with a retrograde period, usually interrupting the flow. But it takes 144 years to go all the way around the zodiac. So anytime Neptune moves, it's a big deal.
Yeah, so we'll talk quite a bit about as Neptune entering Aries. And then we've got this lunar eclipse in Libra. So that's the first eclipse of the year in the first eclipse season.
Yeah.
And lunar eclipse is always interesting. I love an eclipse. There's only 4 this year. So that's a great thing to pay attention to as well.
Yeah.
So in April, there's nothing really major occurring.
Not major, no. I mean, there's, we've got like a Mercury moving direct on April 7th.
Right.
So that's great. It moves direct at 26 Pisces on April 7th.
Okay.
Yeah. There's full moon, obviously. There's full moon every month.
Yeah.
And then...
but no big shifts of energy. This is what we're looking at for this.
Actually, April 18th, Mars enters Leo. So we're going to talk about the Mars ingresses, but just briefly. We're going to talk about them more later. But,
okay.
Yeah, so Mars enters Leo on April 18th.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
So then let's just turn our attention then to May.
Yeah, in May. We have
May
24th, Saturn enters Aries. Saturn is always an interesting one because that is every 2.5 years. It takes almost 30 years to go all the way around the zodiac, 28 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's a generational...
So it's entering Aries.
Yeah. So we'll definitely have an episode about that in
Well, this is huge, right? It's not just... I mean, we'll talk about this at the end. There's quite a lot of cardinality coming out this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I like to... so there's something called the Aries Point.
Yes.
Which and I used to work with Eric Francis of Planet Waves, and he's got, I don't know if he coined the phrase, but the Aries Point.
Yes.
And I'm sure that other astrologers talk about this, but he had this great thing about how the Aries Point is where the personal is the political.
So where is the Aries Point?
That is 0 degrees Aries.
Okay.
So anything that touches 0 degrees Aries is automatically kind of more important.
Yes, it's a critical degree.
Critical degree. And so we'll definitely talk about that when that happens.
That's
for
right.
Sure.
And it's because it's leaving the end of the zodiac Pisces and entering the beginning of the zodiac Aries.
It's like a new year. It's like a new astrological year.
For Saturn. Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Saturn.
Hello, Saturn.
Yeah.
Oh, we're so excited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's an interesting shift, and we'll definitely be talking about that more later on.
Sure. And that's May 24th. So something to look forward to.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So then how are we doing in June?
June is actually quite a busy month.
Okay.
On June 9th, Jupiter enters Cancer.
Okay.
And that's another one we will definitely be talking about. That's another cardinal ingress, and we will talk about that when it occurs. We've talked about Jupiter in Gemini quite a bit already this year. And Jupiter is one of those ones, it takes a year to go, it spends a year in every sign. It takes 12 years to go around the zodiac. We've talked about how it's got this sort of correlation to the Chinese astrology signs.
Yes.
And
it's important. It's important when Jupiter.
It's a big one. It's the biggest planet in the solar system. Why wouldn't we talk about it?
Yeah. So there's going to be that shift as Jupiter leaves Gemini and enters Cancer.
Yeah.
A total different shift of energy altogether. There.
Yeah. And then just a few days later, Jupiter at 1 degree of Cancer will square Saturn at 1 degree of Aries. And this is going to happen 3 times during the year. So that Jupiter square Saturn is a big deal.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
So. And that's going to be in those cardinal signs, and that's super interesting. Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting year. I mean, obviously,
it's very cardinal already.
It's very cardinal. It's very changey.
There's a lot of outer planets shifting, which is important.
It's really important. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Pluto moved into Aquarius in November.
Yes.
The final time. It kind of shifted all the, back and forth. Finally. It shifted back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius over the course of the last 2 years almost.
Yeah.
And finally it is in Aquarius now, and it will be until 2043.
Right.
So that's huge. And then we basically Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Also moving this year.
Yeah,
So-
which really doesn't happen often when you've got all three of the big ones there.
No, exactly.
Okay, so that was June, right?
Yeah, that's June 15th that first square happens. Then June 17th, Mars will enter Virgo. So Mars changing signs happens, once every couple of months. It's not that
6 weeks.
Yeah. But it's still worth noting.
Yeah.
So Mars will enter Virgo on June 17th. June 18th, Jupiter at 7 degrees Cancer will square Neptune at 2 degrees Aries.
Now that'll be interesting. We'll definitely be having an episode about that.
Absolutely.
Because these are the two planets that rule Pisces. So hello, Pisces.
Yeah, totally.
But they're both in cardinal signs, right? Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So that's coming. That's unfolding for us.
Yeah.
And then are we looking towards July?
We are. And July 7th gets going with Uranus entering Gemini again. So
Retrograding back.
retrograde.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
July 17th, Saturn will almost conjunct Neptune. And if you're following along, you may have been like, wait a second, there's some things happening in Aries. Saturn will not quite, but almost conjunct Neptune in those early degrees of Aries.
But it's in orb, right?
Yeah, it's in orb. And that's huge.
So they're squaring each other across, 0 to 1 degrees of the cardinal signs?
Yeah. So Jupiter is squaring both of them. Jupiter in June had squared Saturn and Neptune. So Jupiter has just entered Cancer, and it will be squaring Neptune and Saturn, which are in the early degrees of Aries. And then Saturn is almost going to conjunct Neptune, but not quite.
Not quite yet.
Right, exactly. And I've done in the past, you can, maybe we'll link to it, maybe,
Yeah.
I've done a presentation and a couple of articles about the relationship between Saturn and Neptune, because it is fascinating. There is a fascinating history of those conjunctions and oppositions, especially, but the squares are super interesting too. The conjunctions and oppositions have a huge correlation with, in my research, floods and extreme weather patterns,
right?
Oil spills. So the Exxon Valdez and the one in the Gulf of Mexico, that the extreme floods that happened in New Orleans, and those hurricanes.
Yeah.
And
so this is Saturn conjunct Neptune.
Yeah, so Saturn conjunctions and oppositions. I did a huge presentation about, and also there's some sort of Cold War and nuclear testing sort of things that there's a lot of stuff with the Cold War and with the history of the Soviet Union and a lot of that stuff. So it's really interesting because it's basically, I mean, they're opposites, right? Symbolically, they're opposites.
Yeah.
Neptune is nebulous, it's dreamy, it's illusion and disillusion, and Saturn is about structure and limitations and restriction and constriction, and they couldn't be more opposite symbolically. Yeah. So when they come together, whether in opposition
Aries.
or exactly at the Aries point almost, it's huge.
Yeah.
So
big shifts are coming.
Big shifts, yeah.
Big shifts are coming.
It's super interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's June. And then, July. And then July 18th, the very next day, we have Mercury turning retrograde again at 15 Leo.
Okay. So Mercury's retrograding through the fire signs this year. That was sort of something as well.
Yeah.
Because it's every 4 months. It tends to be in one element each year. Yeah. So this year it's going to be 2025, it'll be the fire sign. So interesting.
It's a very cardinal fiery year.
Yeah. Things are changing. Yeah. Okay, so what about, how are we doing for August?
August, all I have is Mars entering Libra.
Okay.
So, and that's happening August 6th.
Okay, so let's have a look then at September.
Yes. September 7th, we've got a total lunar eclipse in Pisces.
Amazing.
Yeah. And September 22nd, we have Mars entering Scorpio.
That's right, and we've also, on the 21st, we've also got the solar eclipse as well. So that will be in Virgo.
Oh, yeah, that's right, a partial solar eclipse in Virgo. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the eclipses in 2025, I know they're in March and September. It's pretty straightforward. So they're in Pisces and Virgo, where very often they are scattered across signs. But in this year, they're all in the two signs. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And, you may notice that we're not, or you may not notice that we're not doing minor aspects, but there are a lot of minor aspects with major planets.
Yes.
And that's, semi-squares, semi-sextiles, sesquiquadrates, quincunxes, that sort of thing.
Who has time?
Right. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, you can obviously find that kind of look at your ephemeris, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, we're not going to go into super detail about that, but they are happening.
Yeah, of course. We're just really pulling up the highlights. Yeah. All right. So then let's have a look then at October.
Yeah. So in October, the only thing that I've made a note of, and you might consider this as sort of a minor thing, but Jupiter is going to be squaring Chiron. Chiron is
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So Jupiter is going to be at 24 degrees Cancer, and Chiron is going to be at 24 degrees Aries.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
so again, it's this cardinal thing.
Exactly, and that's going to happen a couple of times because of retrogrades, but that happens for the first time October 23rd.
All right. So that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah.
Mm. So then moving on to November.
Yeah, November, Mars is going to go into Sagittarius on November 4th.
Okay.
On November 7th, Uranus is going to retrograde into Taurus from Gemini. And November 9th, Mercury is going to do its third retrograde of the year at 6 degrees Sagittarius.
Again in a fire sign, yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Completing its tour of the fire signs.
So it's interesting there, because if you've got planets in fire signs, Mercury is going to be trining you or conjoining. So it's bringing good things if you're a fire sign. That's why we're bringing it up, right?
Yeah.
For those of you interested in a little more, I'm now offering online astrology seasonal sessions. So there's one session in each of the solar seasonal mid-months, which will be February, May, August and November. I'll be chatting about advanced astrology topics through a Zoom presentation. If you're interested, check out the link for my seasonal sessions in the show notes below. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've seen a couple of things recently on Mercury retrograde, and it's funny because it's one of the few things that non-astrologers know. Like they know Saturn return, they know maybe cusps, and they know Mercury retrograde.
Yes.
And it's almost like a cliche or a buzzword. But I've seen a couple things recently where astrologers will say, like, they don't even think of Mercury retrograde as something bad anymore. Oh. Because there's so many people who are actually born with Mercury retrograde.
Well,
when
that's
they come
the
to
thing.
them, they're like, I've got Mercury retrograde natally. Like,
I do.
Yeah, do you? Mm-hmm. Amazing. And obviously it hasn't hindered your communication.
There's no stopping me.
At all. But maybe what it's done is made you more detail-oriented, more meticulous, more concerned about have I gotten this right? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go over this again and again. And that's a great thing. I mean, honestly, what I've found with Mercury retrograde is that it's kind of, as someone who has a lot of Virgo in her chart, I've noticed that that's one of those times where I can kind of relax and be like, okay, everything's fine. Things aren't moving too fast for me.
Yeah. I do like a Mercury retrograde period as a writer.
Yeah.
And because I can review my stuff.
For sure.
Because, I wake up in the morning, I have ideas about 10 things and I make mental notes. And then I go back during Mercury retrograde and filter out which ones have got the value and dismiss those that are not just going to make the cut.
Totally.
But you need time in your life to reflect on what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Or what were you thinking? And that's your Mercury thing. Yeah. What were you thinking? What are your preconceived ideas?
I mean, it might be an interesting, like case study or what is it called? Like a research, focus group.
Yes.
To, who is more affected by Mercury retrograde? Clearly, I think Geminis are more affected by Mercury retrograde than Virgos.
Do you?
I've just noticed this in my personal life.
Okay.
In fact, it used to be, I worked with a Gemini. Every time Mercury was retrograde, she would be like, oh my God, everything's going wrong. Is Mercury retrograde? And I would check, and sure enough, it was. Because I don't keep track of that, just on my personal.
I don't.
On a personal level. Because it doesn't, impact me,
but your Mercury's direct, right?
Yeah. But this Gemini of mine was just like always right on top of it. She's like, I feel it,
Yes. Well, of course, it depends. If Mercury's retrograding across some planets in your chart, then you're going to know about it because you're going to have to go back and almost apologize for what you said.
Yeah.
Do these pants make you look fat? You've got to go back and apologize as Mercury retrogrades back over.
Or couldn't get to the Zoom meeting in time and someone else had to cover for you and blah, blah, blah. Like these modern problems that we have.
Yes, life's hell, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in general, you as astrologically, you want to keep track. But I mean, I'm not on a day-to-day basis, paying attention to Mercury retrograding or not.
Yeah.
Okay, then, which month are we on to now?
I believe that was November. Yeah, that was November. So December.
Yes.
December 5th, Mars enters Capricorn.
Okay.
December 21st, Jupiter again will square Chiron, and this is going to be at 22 degrees Cancer and 22 degrees Aries.
Uh-huh.
And that's all I've got for December.
Right.
Yeah.
So really, we've picked out the highlights here, and of course there are other things that are going on.
100%.
All the nitty-gritty of it depends if you're doing a broad stroke, which we are here, an annual horoscope, quick look, and then you've got the zoom in sort of things,
right?
I
mean, the Sun and Mercury and Venus are obviously moving the whole year, and minor aspects are happening all year.
So having had a look at all of these planets that are moving here, moving there, moving everywhere, the main focus tends to be that a lot of the outer planets or the superior planets are moving into cardinal signs.
Yeah.
So what we've got Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter entering cardinal signs. Now, cardinal signs are those signs where change is, what do they say? They embrace change. They initiate change.
Initiate change, yeah.
So things are going to change. Now, obviously, things change all the time, but globally, things are definitely going to be changed as these planets move into all of these cardinal signs. We don't really have that much of a balance otherwise.
Yeah.
And then we've just got a Uranus entering then an air sign, Gemini, which is a mutable sign. So that's a different vibe altogether.
Yeah.
But I don't know, well, not in our lifetime have we had Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter in cardinal signs.
Yeah.
So what this means is that these planets that are we've got planets in Aries and we've got planets in Cancer squaring each other, which you alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
But what this means is as the other planets transit, they're going to trigger T-squares and grand crosses and Thor's hammers to these squares. So we will have multiple of these major aspect patterns during the course of the year. And these are all tension-forming aspects.
100%. If anyone is in your mind hearing like Immigrant Song and the Thor's hammer kind of music, that is appropriate. That is the soundtrack of the year. We are going in through cardinal, changey, transformative, revolutionary year.
Adapt or die at this stage.
Yikes. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So with this Thor's hammer thing, what that is, it's a major aspect pattern where you've got a square and then two sesquiquadrats. But the squares are the Aries and Cancer planets.
Yeah.
And when all the other planets go through our friend Scorpio, they will trigger multiple Thor's hammers. So if you're a Scorpio person, you're going to have this Thor's hammer pointing at Scorpio. And if you've got planets there, they will trigger as well.
Wow. Yeah.
And that will generally, definitely when the moon goes through each month, but when the sun gets there in October, Sun, Mercury, Venus, we're going to have multiple Thor's hammers occurring from this base of the Aries and the Cancer planets. So it's going to be like the unwritten rule of the year almost.
Right.
That it's cardinal, it's square, and this is kind of the vibe.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it.
So I've got 3 planets in Scorpio, so I'm already thinking,
just got my
dang.
Scorpio rising, just mere
Is
Scorpio
that all you
rising.
have?
But also my partner has Scorpio, Sun, Mercury, and Neptune in the first house. So
the likelihood is that they're going to be Thor's hammers, which are major aspect patterns, which are manifesting. There's no soft aspects. There's only hard aspects. Yeah. Creating tension that gets you off the couch, and you really have to deal with it.
Yeah.
You don't want to deal with it, but you're being forced into dealing with all these issues at this time. People might feel stressed.
Yes.
Particularly towards the second half of the year.
Yeah.
Not that we don't feel stressed all the time, but there's going to be there will be issues that are going to unfold that we are unaware of at the moment.
Yeah.
That will unfold depending on your chart and how these planets are going to trigger you.
That's on top of the stress you already know about.
Exactly.
The political and the economic and all of that stuff that you're already
the housing problem.
About. The housing and the price of eggs and
And of course, if you've got any planets in Libra or Capricorn, they're going to be triggering these squares as well. You get T-squares in, you get grand crosses in, and it's all of these are these tension riding aspects. So the square is almost the aspect of the year because of this. Yes, there might be a trine, but really we don't really celebrate the good days.
It's true.
We'll say,
it's just like comments, right? It's like yada, 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 100 good comments and one bad, and you're like,
exactly.
What did you say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got the day when you go to work, next thing you get fired, then you have a car accident and you get home and your husband leaves you. That's what we're talking about. It's those sort of days.
The dog was so nice to me that day. You aren't going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the dog bites you or something, yeah. So, I think the thing is that forewarned is forearmed, and awareness is key that tensions may rise later on in the year or even sooner, as soon as these planets move into position.
Yeah.
And if they trigger your chart or your client's charts, if you're a practicing astrologer, you need to be able to talk about these things as well.
Yeah. And it's one of those, I've been paying attention to this stuff since, I want to say the late 90s, but really since around 2000. I mean, I grew up with astrology, but really I've started to pay attention to the transits and like the global patterns and stuff like that since like around 2001, right around the beginning of like the crisis period that we're in, according to, the generational theory and all that stuff. And these pivotal years that all the astrologers go, ooh, that's going to be a big year. 2000, 2001, 2012, 2016, 2025. All of these astrologers have said 2025 is going to be major. So
because of this,
here we are. And may we live in interesting times. And and we totally do.
And of course, if you're pregnant now and you've got you're due this year, these aspects will be hard baked into your child's chart.
Right.
And they will manifest as they grow up as well.
Yes. Powerful little souls incarnating right now.
Determined, focused. It's cardinality, and it's all about the cardinal signs are the leaders of the zodiac.
Yeah.
They are the ones who strive forward and say, "Follow me, chaps," and so they go over the hill.
Yeah. Oh, just like Teddy Roosevelt.
Really?
Yeah. I'm sorry. He's one of my pet favorite presidents. And, if you don't have a pet favorite president, well, I mean, what do you even, I don't know.
I don't know.
No, I love me some Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, he was great. But yeah, he said, "Follow me," famously. So,
is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he was one of the Rough Riders. That was his.
Is that right? So this is not the year of. It's not what you can do for your country. It's what you can do for your country.
Yeah.
It's not that type of year. It's the. It's time for action. Know where you're going, know what you're doing, and focus. And there are indications, of course, where these planets are in your chart as well. It's going to make all the difference to where these squares are happening.
Right. Exactly.
And if you've got planets at 0 degrees Aries or Cancer, you're going to know about them this year.
Yeah. So, totally. Well, I mean, just. Not to just, hey, I haven't gone off on a personal tangent yet.
No.
So here we go. So Teddy Roosevelt, just in case anyone who's listening is also like, oh, I love Teddy Roosevelt too. I think the reason I love Teddy Roosevelt so much is because A, he was a Scorpio, October 27th, 1858. But he was a Scorpio with Cancer moon, just like my partner.
Oh.
And, I mean, what's not to love? He was an environmentalist, but he was also like a war hero, but he was also a prolific writer. And I mean, he was just great. Super interesting. Guy. I don't know. Anyway, and he had Gemini rising apparently.
Well, that's a good
exactly,
role model
very
for
personal.
you too.
Exactly. Very personable.
Yeah. And also I want to say that if you have your sun, particularly in the first 5 degrees of Aries or Cancer, you're going to be stimulated in ways that you have not yet been aware of as these outer planets come through. They will change you.
Totally.
And make you'll come out of it a different person through the experiences that unfold during these transits. So it's going to be interesting.
Definitely.
Do you have any planets at the first 5 degrees of Aries or Cancer?
Yeah, Saturn.
Oh.
Saturn at 2 degrees Cancer.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
And my North Node is at I think 2 or 3 degrees Capricorn.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
I ain't got nothing in the first 5 degrees of the cardinal signs at all. So yeah. So hopefully I'm going to just get under the radar and just watch it happen around me.
I'll tell you how it goes.
So it's always interesting to see the flavor of the month. I remember back, I think it was 2015, and everything moved into fire, which suited me perfectly.
Yeah.
And it was just a year for stuff happening for me. Whereas this year, it's this theme of cardinality, which is
Yeah.
It's going to overshadow a lot of things, and it's particularly as the Sun, Mercury, and Venus move into these signs as well during the course of the year. So yeah. Okay, so this episode we've gone through some of the absolute highlights of forthcoming highlights, should I say, for 2025. The big shifts and changes and astrological events that we consider important. Most of these Arwynne and I will definitely be giving specific episodes to as they come closer to the actual timing.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, of course, there are many other things going down in 2025, but as an astrologer, you've got to start somewhere. There's so much to look at. Yeah. So if you found value in this episode, please do consider sharing it with anybody who'd be interested. You can email us at starzology@gmail.com. Please make sure to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out every Sunday, and that is at starzology.com/newsletter. Make sure to follow Arwynne, and she is at...
I'm at mspink.net, that's mspink.net, and I am talking about art and politics and history and books and movies and whatever interests me, and it's once a week. So
all fun stuff.
Yeah, sign up.
And you've got a newsletter?
I do. It comes out every Saturday.
Okay, so they can sign up for that as well?
Please do.
Okay. So to our listeners, you can text us if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you go to the top link in the show notes, there's a live link there. Click through. You can text us with any of your questions or thoughts on our episode. We'd love to hear from you. And please do visit our blog at starzology.com, where we have some freebies for you, astrologically themed, and they would be at starzology.com/freebies. So Arwynne, thank you so much for joining us as we rehash or forward hash, or however would you say it?
Pre-hash
2025 with the main things that are coming down.
Yeah.
Lots of excitement coming up in this year, clearly. Total different vibe to 2024.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next. Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there, or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.